He used to carry a badge that meant something. Detective Frank Morrison, 23 years on the force, hundreds of cases closed, countless families reunited with missing loved ones. But after the injury that ended his career, the best job he could find was wearing an orange vest in a mall parking lot for $12 an hour. The other security guards saw a man who'd fallen from grace. What they didn't see was a father who still remembered every detail of every missing child case he'd ever worked. And when a stranger tried to take someone's daughter in broad daylight, they learned that true protectors don't retire, they just change uniforms. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we continue this powerful story of honor, sacrifice, and the protective instinct that never dies, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who never abandon their duty, even when their titles change. On his office wall, his old police badge and new security manager ID hang side by side. The only difference between them is that one is gold and the other is plastic. But for Frank, what matters isn't the metal, it's the purpose behind it. Emma is now 8 years old, still comes shopping with her mother. When she sees Frank, she runs and hugs him. "Hi, Uncle Frank. Did you protect someone today?" "I always protect someone," Frank replies, "including you." So now I ask you, have you ever met someone whose title changed but never abandoned their mission? Someone who continued justice without a badge, protection without authority? Share their story in the comments, because here at the Human Stories, we believe that true heroes change their uniforms but not their missions. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, subscribe and share it with someone who believes that real protection comes from the heart, not the badge. We'll see you in the next story, and until then, remember, sometimes the most reliable protector is the person in the most unexpected place. Anyone would have done the same thing, Frank had replied. No, Susan had shaken her head. Everyone would have just looked and passed by, but you didn't just see and pass by. You still carry the protective instinct. Frank thought about Susan's words. Maybe she was right. Carrying a badge didn't make you a protector. Being a protector enabled you to carry a badge, and he had never stopped being a protector. A year later, the Phoenix Police Department hired Frank as a volunteer consultant to share his experience in missing child cases, to train young detectives. He went to his old workplace 2 days a week, continuing his duties at the shopping mall the rest of the time. "What's it like to return to your old job?" a young police officer had asked. "Actually, I never left," Frank had replied. "My methods just changed." Today, Frank Morrison still works at Desert Ridge. He now wears a suit instead of an orange vest, sits in a security office instead of the parking lot, but he still observes his surroundings with the same careful eyes, still acts with the same protective instinct. 6 months later, under Frank's leadership, the security team had prevented 3 thefts, 2 pickpocketing attempts, and 1 fraud attempt. But the moment he was most proud of was when he reunited a lost child with their family in 15 minutes. That night at home, when Linda asked him, "How was today?" Frank had smiled. "Today I protected someone. I did my duty." "Do you still think of yourself as a parking lot attendant?" Linda had laughed. "No," Frank had replied, "I think of myself as a protector. I always was. I always will be." Emma's mother Susan came shopping every week after that day. Not just for shopping, but to see Frank. "If you hadn't acted that way," she had said one day, "I don't even want to think about what would have happened to my daughter." "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you tell us?" Frank hesitated. "Because I'm no longer a detective. I'm a parking lot attendant." The manager nodded. "Mr. Morrison, I want to offer you the position of security chief, with a salary increase. This shopping mall could take someone with your experience as a leader in the security team." Frank was surprised. "But my leg? What we saw last week wasn't the power of your physical ability, but the power of your mental ability. Recognizing danger, thinking quickly, staying calm. These are also necessary in office work." Frank accepted the offer. He was no longer a parking lot attendant, but Frank Morrison, security chief of Desert Ridge Marketplace. In his new office, there were 2 photos on his desk. One from his graduation ceremony at the Phoenix Police Department, the other a photo taken with Emma the moment she hugged him. In the following days, the incident was featured in local news. Frank's photo was published under the headline, "Parking Lot Attendant Prevents Child Abduction Attempt," but the news didn't tell his real story. Mike and Carlos began to look at Frank differently. "Wow, Frank," Mike had said, "you're really different. How do you do this job so well?" Frank had smiled. Like I said, I'm detail-oriented. A week later, the mall manager called Frank to his office. "Mr. Morrison," he had said, "after last week's incident, we did some research about you." Frank tensed. Was he going to lose his job? "You served 23 years with the Phoenix Police Department. Your detective career is quite impressive. You specialized in missing child cases." "Sweetheart, you're safe," Frank said breathlessly to the little girl. "I'm taking you to your mommy." 2 minutes later, the shopping mall security team arrived. Behind them came a running woman, presumably the girl's mother, screaming as she approached. "Emma, Emma, baby." The woman hugged her daughter. "I was looking for you everywhere." "Mommy, this bad man tried to take me, but this uncle saved me." Emma hugged her mother. The mother looked at Frank, tears in her eyes. "Thank you. God, if you hadn't been here." Frank nodded. "It was my duty." But in reality, this wasn't just his duty. This was his identity. Whether they called him a parking lot attendant or retired, he was a protector, a father, a detective, and no badge could change that. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Frank took out his radio. "Security, we need emergency assistance in Section D. Possible child abduction attempt." At that moment, the man started running. He dropped the little girl and ran toward the minivan. Frank tried to catch up with him, but his leg condition wouldn't allow it. But it didn't matter. The child was safe. But what could he do now? He was no longer a detective. He had no badge, no jurisdiction. He was just a parking lot attendant. What if he was wrong? If he lost his job, how would he support his family? Then he heard the little girl's voice. "Mommy, where's Mommy? This man is not my daddy." At that moment, the decision was made for Frank. Badge or no badge, detective or parking lot attendant, a child was in danger and he had a duty to protect her. "Excuse me," Frank called out loudly and started walking toward the man. "Parking security, is there a problem?" The man froze. When the little girl saw Frank, she began crying even louder. "This man is forcing me to go with him. My mom is in the mall, she's looking for me." "Everything's fine," the man replied tensely. "This is my daughter. Just getting her to the car in this hot weather." "No, I'm not," the girl screamed. "He's not my daddy. My mommy is shopping at Macy's." Frank approached calmly but determinedly. He didn't even feel the pain in his left leg. Adrenaline was flowing through his veins like in the old days. "Sir, let's calm down a bit." Frank spoke in an authoritative but calm voice. "There seems to be a small misunderstanding with your daughter. May I see your identification?" The man panicked. "ID? Why ID? This is my daughter." "Because the child says she doesn't know you, and in this situation, security protocol requires ID verification." Frank lied. There was no protocol, but his authoritative tone was enough to convince the man. The man began to back away. "It's not necessary. We're leaving." It was 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Frank was standing at the entrance to Section D, directing incoming vehicles. The heat was unbearable, but he continued to do his job. The parking lot was quite full. Despite being a weekday, families had come shopping due to school vacation. A man in his 30s was holding a 6-year-old girl by the hand, walking toward a white minivan. At first glance, it might have seemed normal, but Frank's trained eye immediately noticed the signs of abnormality. The little girl was crying. She kept looking back toward the shopping mall, as if desperately asking for help. The man looked tense, constantly looking around, walking with quick steps. Most importantly, the little girl wasn't calling him daddy. She was crying, "I want my mommy." The alarm bells that came from 23 years of experience began ringing in Frank's mind. He had seen this scenario hundreds of times. In missing child cases, the behavior patterns of child abductors were always the same: haste, paranoia, and the lack of a natural bond between them and the child. These small victories were good for him. Maybe he wasn't solving big cases anymore, but he could still protect people. He could still make a difference. That's when he saw the parking lot job posting. Desert Ridge, shift from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 96 b.m., $96 a day. It wasn't even a third of his previous salary, but at least he would have a purpose. He could observe people, ensure their safety. In the early days, the other security guards looked at him strangely. Mike, 28 years old, had been doing this job since high school graduation and didn't take parking lot security very seriously. Carlos, 35 years old, a father of 2, was doing this as a second job. For them, this was just counting cars and occasionally helping lost car owners. For Frank, it was different. He approached each day like a case file. When he came to his shift in the morning, he would review the parking lot layout, check the angles of security cameras, and identify points where suspicious behavior might occur. During lunch breaks, he would write incident reports, note license plate numbers, and record the habits of regular customers. "Frank, why are you taking this so seriously?" Mike had asked one day. "This is just a parking lot, not the FBI." Frank had smiled. "It's become a habit. I'm detail-oriented." He had never mentioned being a detective. Somehow he was ashamed. The man who once found missing children and reunited them with their families was now finding missing cars. The man who once caught the city's most dangerous criminals was now warning people who violated parking rules. But over time, he began to realize that his old skills were still useful. He spotted suspicious behavior early, preventing potential problems. Once he had warned a woman whose car was about to be stolen, scaring off the thieves. Another time, he had noticed young people trying to mug an elderly man's wallet as he came shopping and alerted security. His pension was enough to live on, but for Frank, living didn't just mean paying his bills. His wife Linda constantly told him rest, find a hobby, spend time with your grandson. But Frank felt incomplete. When he woke up in the morning, he had no mission, no people to protect, no cases to solve. The parking lot at Desert Ridge Marketplace in Phoenix always displayed the same scene in the afternoon heat. The temperature had reached 113 degrees, steam was rising from the asphalt, and people were running to their cars. At the entrance to Section D, a man in an orange reflective vest stood directing incoming and outgoing vehicles. Frank Morrison, 52 years old, graying hair visible under his sun hat, eyes still carrying the careful observation that comes from 23 years of police experience. In his hand was a plastic clipboard, a radio clipped to his belt, black boots worn from walking on his feet. When people looked at him, they saw just another low-wage worker. No one knew he had once been one of the Phoenix Police Department's most effective detectives. Frank's story had begun 3 years ago. More accurately, it had ended. That night, during a raid on drug traffickers, his decisions had led to the capture of a 12-person gang and the seizure of tons of heroin circulating on the streets. But at the end of the operation, while chasing the last suspect trying to escape, he had taken a wrong step on a dark rooftop and fallen from a 2-story building. 6 months in the hospital, a year and a half of physical therapy, metal plates in his left leg, prosthetic joint in his right knee. He could no longer run, could not walk for long periods, but worse, the police department's health board had deemed him unfit for field duty. His 23-year career had suddenly come to an end.